you and a little bit about your practice, and then we'll talk about parent coordinators.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm a psychologist in private practice in Durham, and the bulk of my practice is focused on helping people go through separation and divorce. And so in that, I work with people in individual therapy and family therapy, but I also do things like parenting coordination and custody evaluations for the courts, psychological evaluations as well.
And we're here specifically to talk about parent coordinators, so let's focus on that a little bit. Some of you may know what that is, you may not know what that is, but it's really for parents who are going through what we call in the legal field, and you too, high conflict divorces, which means there's a lot of paperwork flying through the court system. We make multiple court appearances, and so there's a lot of animosity and high conflict going on. And so can you explain sort of what a parent coordinator is and what sort of family it would be appropriate for?
So it definitely originated with the idea of the high conflict divorce situation.
And how would you define, what's a definition of a high, what would that look like?
Really looking at how often are you in court, like you said, but also what is the communication like between the parents? Are they having to use their attorneys a lot in order to have what would seem like pretty benign conversations? Are they having a hard time making decisions? Are they having a hard time communicating with other people? So teachers, pediatricians, therapists kind of get caught in the middle of the conflict, and it can be really helpful to have somebody who can help step in and take the other professionals out of the middle of the conflict, the kids out of the middle of the conflict, and help the people kind of go to their own corner in a sense. I do think that it's evolved over time where you don't necessarily have to be considered high conflict as much as recognizing that you don't do well in your dynamic with your your partner. And so how do you put somebody else in place who can help you make decisions that way you're not wasting time, you're not spending 3 months trying to decide on whether, you go to soccer practice or something like that. So I think the main goal is to help with decision making. Depending on the parenting coordinator that you get, you might also, it depends on whether you have a history of mental health problems. You might want somebody with that background in particular to help monitor treatment, or help monitor treatment for some of the children. If there's a substance use issue, it can be particularly helpful in monitoring that kind of information or treatment as well. I also think that having people who are really trying to work on their co-parenting and work on their communication, if you have the right parenting coordinator, they can help you with that too. Because they want to help you develop new ways to communicate, kind of a protocol for how often do we communicate, what do we communicate about, and do that in a way that helps reduce the conflict so that the parenting coordinator doesn't have to make your decisions for you.
I mean, I think the whole purpose, because I did the parent coordinator training back in the summer, and it wasn't at all what I expected, because I've always used attorneys who are parent coordinators, and it seemed to be that there would be a conflict, parents could make a decision, and the parent coordinator would make the decision for them. But as I went through the training, it was more about teaching them and modeling for them how to communicate. And so the end result is that they can then leave you, fly from the nest, and be able to co-parent and communicate and make decisions together.
That would be the goal.
Right.
Yeah.
Not always happens, but it is the goal. So if, let's say that you're, well, as part of the court system, parent coordinator is by statute appointed by a judge. There's a parent coordinator order entered, and there are check boxes that say what the parent coordinator can make decisions about. And so let's say that you're my parent coordinator. So sort of walk me through the process and what that would feel like. From, so there's an intake or an initial meeting.
So initially, the attorneys will either agree upon a parenting coordinator, and so the attorneys might reach out to whomever that's the possible people, or the parents might have a quick phone call. There's a difference of opinion about that, right? There's concern. Are you going to
favor
that person? But honestly, if you're having a 5-minute phone call, it should be about, like, what are your fees?
Correct.
How do you work? Are you available? That kind of thing,
Mhm.
which isn't going to bias anybody
Right.
anyway.
Right.
Then you have an appointment conference, and different counties do this differently. Some are more strict about making sure those conferences occur, and
Right.
some are less strict about
Okay.
that. As a parenting coordinator, I always make sure that you have that,
Agree.
because it's really important for the parents to hear from the judge about what the expectations are.
In Wake County, we do that, and I think that is important because I think it gives it a little more power and lets the judge know that this is the real deal.
Right.
That you need to follow what they say, and here's what the rules are, and if you don't, it could be contempt. So I think they go in, I hope, with the idea that this is really important.
Right.
Right.
And then you generally have an intake appointment with the parenting coordinator where you talk about what's happened over, the course of time that led up to the need for a parenting coordinator. Depending on the parenting coordinator, sometimes they will get into the history of your relationship, sometimes they won't. It kind of depends on what your areas of authority are,
Right.
and what information you really need to have. So if there is a history of domestic violence, you want to make sure that you are handling meetings properly.
Right.
You should or shouldn't be in the same room with that person. You should know that ahead of time, but
Mhm.
you want to check up on that kind of thing
Right.
in your intakes. Is there a history of a mental health concern?
Mhm.
Do you need to be in touch with other providers,
Right.
either for the parents or for the children?
Children.
And then figuring out what the parents think they want to get out of the process, and then educating them a little bit about what they're really going to get out of the process. I think a lot of people hope that having somebody else involved is going to change things pretty dramatically, and that's more often than not the case, right? You put structures in place, you help with decision making,
Right.
you help the parents come up with a plan for how they're going to make decisions, how you're going to communicate, how often, and then each person really needs to understand that they are kind of functioning in their own household, right?
Right.
That you can't cross over to households, you have to have boundaries, and the parenting coordinator can help set that up.
So it's sort of like you give each parent then has a framework in which to really communicate. I think that's what it really boils down to
Right.
with the other parent. I know in Wake County especially, and most judges I think now have started with the premise of joint legal custody, which is it's physical custody and legal custody, but legal custody is y'all have to come together to make decisions about big things about the children, where they go to school, their medical, their therapy, all of that. And so if you have parents, to me, who are in court, which means they can't communicate because they couldn't even come up with a schedule, it's hard sometimes to it's hard for them to know how to do joint custody because they don't know.
Right.
That's how we got here, because
Right.
we were not able to make decisions.
Right.
So of the check boxes, what sort of authority does a parent coordinator have?
So again, it depends on the situation,
Right.
but there are extracurricular activities, making decisions about therapy, scheduling, but they're small related issues, so you can't change the big overall schedule.
Right, you can't, you don't have the authority, or parent coordinators don't have the authority to change the custodial schedule.
Right.
But you can tweak it, so.
So if it says that you're supposed to do drop-off exchange at 8 a.m. and it really works better for everybody
Right.
to do it at 9 a.m., then you can say,
Can do
yes,
that.
let's do it at 9 a.m.
Right.
If the parents come to a decision that they actually agree upon, then you can put that in writing.
Right.
This is something that you have agreed upon and you're going to follow from here out. And then you pass it on to the attorneys who may
Then
make some
it,
adjustments.
right, and
then-
put it in a consent order
consent
and
order,
sort of
right.
modify the original order.
Mhm.
What type of parents, or there may not be, are there types of parents who are not appropriate for parent coordinator services?
I think that the way to think about it is how much intervention do you need in order to get real life decision making done? So if you have concerns that your partner, your parenting partner, has significant mental health problems
Right.
that interfere, substance use issues, cognitive issues, or even personality disorder,
Right.
whether that's an actual personality disorder or traits of a personality disorder, those are situations where it can be helpful to have that third party come in and help with decision making. I think if you are
make decisions or you're trained in this, so if you see that there's a mental health issue, can you order one parent to go to a therapist or?
So the way that the PC statute is written is that you can make recommendations.
Okay.
However, if you make recommendations and somebody isn't following your recommendations, then you have the authority to make a report to the court. And then the judge can be made aware of the situation, in which case, most of the time, if you really think this person needs to have therapy, a judge is going to say you probably should go to therapy.
Right, yeah.
It's different than if you think something very expensive or time, consuming should occur, like a psychological evaluation, takes more time, costs more money,
Right.
is more intrusive, then the judge may or may not automatically say, let's do that. But judges really rely on parenting coordinators, and if you have made a decision, a PC decision can be appealed.
Right.
My experience is that judges don't really like it when you do that, because you have a parenting coordinator for a reason.
Right.
And you have more information than the judge usually does in a short amount of time.
Right.
And so the judge is going to say, unless, you're saying you should send the kid to, 3 weeks of camp in Europe that costs you a lot of money,
Right.
then the judge is going to say you should have done what the parenting coordinator said.
Right.
Yeah.
And are there consequences for not following what you say?
So from the parenting coordinator position, you can reapportion the funding,
The fees, right.
So if somebody is not following directions, or you've had to spend a lot of time on a particular topic, then you can charge one parent more than the other. The thing that the judge then can do is, if you feel like you need to write a report to the court, then the judge can find the parent to be in contempt
And not following the order, because if the
And
order
they
says they're going to follow your recommendations.
change the overall way that the fees are set up.
Correct.
So more often than not, it's that each party has to pay
Right.
their kind of 50% of
Right.
the fees.
Right.
But if one person is really using the PC either inappropriately or just more, then the judge might say, well, you have to pay
And
more.
more, right. And that's the other, I think that's one issue, is that there is a cost to it.
Yeah.
The court has to find that, one, it's a high conflict case, but that the parents have the ability to pay for it
Right.
too. So I'm sure there are a lot of parents who need a parent coordinator, but there's some restrictions on that.
Right.
And so for those types of services that you offer, we were chatting prior to, you can provide those services without court intervention, right?
Yes.
Right. The parents
So-
sort of on their own realize we have an issue here.
Right, so you can have a co-parenting therapist. You can either decide between the two of you that you're going to come in and meet with that person and you're going to follow the recommendations of that person, or you can do that with your attorneys and come up with a consent order. I've had a number of families who write me into their consent orders and say, we're going to follow her recommendations.
Right.
It's different in that if somebody doesn't follow my recommendation, I can't then, write a report to the
court,
judge.
right.
But the other parent is in the position to say, you're not doing what you said you would do in good faith, and therefore they can then decide that they want to file something with the court.
And so, is there ever a situation where it's appropriate for one parent that says, I think we really need this help, but the other parent says, no? Can you coach one parent to learn how to sort of communicate with one?
You can do co-parenting, coaching, and trying to help the person figure out how to deal with difficult communication, how to set their own boundaries, how to communicate effectively. I think ultimately the struggle becomes if that person refuses to engage, even with all of their best effort, then what? And so then people are often in this situation where they decide that they need to go to court and ask for a parenting coordinator to be appointed because they've kind of made their best
efforts to do that. And so a lot of clients all the time go, oh, we co-parent, great. And then I find out you're not really co-parenting. One parent is just acquiescing because they don't want to rock the boat, and that's not co-parenting.
Right.
How would you define parents that are doing great at co-parenting?
So I think of it kind of on a continuum.
Okay.
So most parents who are doing parenting coordination are what I call parallel parenting, where they make big decisions together. They don't interfere with the daily decisions.
Right.
They have very minimal conversation, and they try to stay out of each other's way.
So your household is your household, and I'm not going to go by, I mean, there are some rules that you need to follow, but
Right.
you trust that the other parent is doing what's in the best interest.
Or
of the
you
children.
don't, but you agree to disagree and stay out of each
Okay,
other's
okay,
way.
right.
You might have concerns that the other parent is feeding too much sugar, but
Right,
you
right,
recognize
right.
there's not much you can do
Do
about
that.
that, so you kind of stay out of that.
Correct.
Then, there's co-parenting as we think of it in the sense of really collaborative, kind of kumbaya.
Mhm.
We're at all of the activities together.
Yeah.
We sit next to each other, and there are a lot of people who can do that, but that is more difficult, and you have to be really committed,
You do.
good at your communication. It's oftentimes easier to do when your children are also easygoing kids who
Right,
don't have a lot of
right.
problems.
Mhm.
If you have a child who has a severe anxiety
Mhm.
disorder and you have conflict around how you should be treating
Right.
that, then it's harder to get along. I mean, it just is. It's harder
It
to
is.
get
I
along.
agree.
Even if you're married, it's harder to get along.
That's great.
So then I think in the middle is kind of where most people really are at. Most of the time they agree on most of the things.
Right.
They have something in place where they can be at the teacher conference together. They would go to a play together. They might not sit next to each other, but they can be there and they can have conversation. They can have a birthday party,
Mhm.
but they don't have to feel like they're friendly.
Have to
They're
be friends.
just friendly colleagues in a sense, right?
Right.
They're not friends, they're friendly colleagues,
Right.
I guess.
Right.
And I think for kids, a lot of parents will feel like they have to be that kumbaya,
Mhm.
but really kids need you to be in the middle. I mean, it's great if you can be really cooperative,
Right.
but as long as you're getting along and you don't have overt conflict in front of the
Mhm.
children and you're able to work together on most things most of the time,
Right.
that's what's
Okay.
great for your kids.
Is it talk about going to activities and things together, is that an important thing that parents need to do for children of divorce?
It's really important for kids to feel like they don't have to keep secrets,
Right.
and that they aren't worried about if I see my parents at an event, is something going to happen.
Right.
So even if you aren't sitting next to each other and chit-chatting, it's important for kids to be able to see that you're both
They're
there.
And
And
supporting
if
them.
you are
Right.
remarried
Mhm.
and you have stepchildren involved,
Right.
it's important for those people to really be integrated
Mhm.
into the family
Mhm.
as well, in a way that just shows you are my kid, you're at the forefront, this is the rest of your family.
Right. Right,
Mm-hmm.
I agree. It's like my ex and I, my child's 17 now, we got divorced and separated when he was 2.
Mhm.
And we still spend Thanksgiving together. He comes to my mom's house, he brings his mom, we go to school functions, we still go to school functions together and all that. I mean, I don't wanna, live with them or be with them,
Right.
but I know it's important. I mean,
Right.
you sort of have to put yourself aside
Right,
and realize what's important.
right.
So is there any advice you can give those who are not going through the separation and divorce, but who are supporting them, and they see this high conflict? I mean, what advice can you give them to help a parent see that this isn't helpful for your kids?
So I think if you are in the position of being a spouse, or being a grandparent,
Right.
or an aunt or
Right.
uncle, you're in the best position to be able to say, do you understand that, every time you guys have an argument in front of Johnny,
Mhm.
that's difficult for him. Here is an option that you should consider.
Right.
I think a lot of people are worried about feeling like they're butting in, telling people
Right,
that they're
exactly.
doing something wrong. But oftentimes people need to hear from a trusted
That's what I'm
person
saying.
that they are concerned and how can I help support you in making a
Right,
choice that's
and I
gonna
think
be
like
for
turning
everybody.
it and reframing it in that in a positive way, because sometimes they don't want to hear it from me. So I try to sort of figure out, is there someone that they trust or has some influence over them that can help them see how important that is. Let's talk about cost a little bit. I know there's not not a flat fee or, no fee or anything, but there is a cost associated. So there is, I'm assuming you charge by, there's an hourly rate, just like we went to a therapist.
Right.
Is it covered, it's not covered by insurance, I'm assuming?
No, parenting coordination is not covered by insurance, because you can also be seeing an attorney who's a parenting coordinator.
Right,
So it's not a
exactly.
mental health service.
Right.
You have a retainer, usually most people have, that's split between the parents and then
right.
an hourly fee. I think depending on what county you're in, the hourly fee is usually around $200 an hour.
That's what I would say, yeah.
Most people require a retainer of $1,000 to $2,000 to get started. Again, that depends on where you're at.
Right.
And then you have that intake appointment, you kind of have to get caught up. So do you have to make phone calls? How many meetings do you need to have before you meet with the parents together? There are some people, like we have telehealth now, which is really great. So you can have, you can be here and the other parents here and the other parents here, and you get to see each other, but you don't have to feel that. And it can really be helpful to decrease the tension. And if one person is, really needing to take a break, they can take a break in the comfort of their office, their home, rather than feeling like they have to kind of skulk around and hide in the bathroom or something like that. So I think that's a really good option for people. And I know a number of people who have that kind of thing set up. Yeah.
And so is there, do you wait, did the parents contact you? Did they call you up and say, hey, we can't figure out what school to go to? And then you step in? Or is there a sort of a system to it?
So I think, again, that depends on the parenting coordinator and how much needs to be done. Oftentimes having a number of sessions where you kind of get the lay of the land and then having a regular check-in is a good way to go.
Right.
For some people, I have one family that I've worked with for a while who I hardly ever hear from. They're really good at managing their own issues, and then something will come up and then they'll give you a call. And then you can kind of, come on in and see what's going on
in that respect. We talked about the interaction with the court, the cost. Parents with personality disorders, we sort of just touched on that. Is that an appropriate parent? Can you co-parent and parent coordinator with a parent with a personality disorder?
So I think the issue is what your definition of co-parenting is, right? So if you are trying to co-parent in a way that is very cooperative, that can be very difficult to do when somebody has a personality disorder. So having a parenting coordinator in place can help because they can manage the toxic communication, they can cut down on the communication, they can be involved for making decisions. I think if you are really good at setting your own boundaries, then you can manage some of that, but oftentimes at some point it's just too much. And you need to have somebody else to help you.
And so do you see the there's our family wizard, which a lot of our parents use, that the court can go in and see, they can see the communication, they can see the emails, they can see what's going on. Do you help parents and coach them? Because, I get emails that are 4 or 5 pages long and a lot of stuff that I know that's what you want to say, but there's a better way to say that. So do you help them learn how to do this?
I think that's one of the things that most parenting coordinators are doing, help people use the BIF, the brief, informative, firm, and friendly process, where you help people really get to the point, don't put your opinions in there, what is it that you need to ask. I give everybody a kind of download of these are all the areas that you should be thinking about, talking about. These are, different strategies for maybe you only need to have email once a week. You don't need to have texting every day. You should only be calling in case there's an emergency. So you actually answer the phone. Oh, I'm not going to get a tirade.
There's something that
emergency.
That's true.
And setting that kind of thing in place.
That's great. So we touched a little bit about services that you offer other than parent coordinators. So tell us a little bit about your staff and what you offer and how people can get in touch with you.
Sure. We really like to focus on alternative dispute services. I'm a trained mediator, and I've been trained in collaborative divorce, and I really like to help families figure out how to do things to stay out of the court system as much as possible.
Right.
And sometimes you can't help it; you end up in
That's
the court
right, you
system.
do. I mean,
But even if you end up there, you can still find other ways to make good decisions about your kids. Come up with a parenting plan.
right.
Before you have to go to have a judge who just doesn't know your family
That's
as well.
That's right.
Sometimes individual therapy is all that you need.
Mhm.
Sometimes you need some family therapy, which when you're going through a divorce can sound a little bit like kooky to some people, I think. But really, if your goal is how do we talk to the kids?
Exactly.
How do we
Talk
make
each
decisions
other,
about
right.
them? Right. How do we talk with each other?
Right.
Then you can do that for a short period of time, very focused way that can be useful to everybody, and then you can get yourself out.
Right, right.
It's not like you are
I think
saying you're going to be engaged in that.
No, and I don't think that's
the kid's
what
life.
anybody wants.
Right.
So, can a family use your practice for individual therapy, family therapy, and maybe some co-parenting therapy? So it's a one-stop sort of shop.
Yeah, we have enough therapists that we have some families where the child will see someone, they'll see me for co-parenting. One of the parents sees one of the other therapists for their own therapy, and then a child will see a therapist.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Because, you know,
And then you all can talk in a way that you don't have to worry about scheduling and it taking
Exactly.
5 weeks to get a hold of another therapist. It can be really helpful to have people have therapy at the same time.
Right, I
even.
know. That's a shocking idea, but oh my God, I love that. So how can people get in? Well, let me ask you this. You know, a lot of times finding a PC is hard, and finding a therapist, especially in our sort of line of work, is my clients always say, yeah, but they can't get an appointment for 5 months or whatever. So, what's the reality check on that? You know.
So I think most people, certainly with us, you should be able to get in within a couple of weeks.
Oh, okay, great.
And I think with most people, if you have a practice where you have a number of practitioners, you should be able to get in to see somebody.
Okay.
I think what you run into is if it's a one person
through.
practice, then they do
They have a limited
wait.
amount of time.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you serve? Where's your office? Is in Durham.
I'm in
right?
Durham,
And
but
do you
we're
serve
right on that corridor where we have people who
Okay.
come from Sanford.
Oh, good.
You know, we
yeah.
have people who come from Wake County
Right.
because it's right off of 40. It's easy to get to.
Okay.
If you work in, the triangle, like the RTP,
RTP.
area, it's really
Right.
easy.
And so tell folks how they can get in touch with you.
So our website
Uh-huh.
is kkjpsych.com, and you can send me an email at drkatrina@kkjpsych.com, or you can call our office. The number's on the website, and we will make sure that we're now in a position where we have somebody who's always answering the phone.
Yay!
Unless, of course, we're like all in session and somebody's out sick, but we're able to answer the phone, which is
So
really
you're
helpful.
responsive, and
Right,
yes,
right,
and I know that. And you have a sterling reputation
thank you.
with I know it with attorneys, and I know with the court system. So if you get involved with the family, and we recommend you, we feel like they're in good hands. And so
Thank you.
I appreciate you
that.
coming and talking about parent coordinators, and especially collaborative law, and trying to keep families out of the court system. I think that's what we all aspire to. So thanks everyone for joining us, and let us know if you have any questions. So we will see you next time.